Comments that
we
show up will
did.
show up mine, and I'll put them on the screen anyway. And by the way, we
Yeah.
are now officially live, buddy. So welcome to the Mentor Moments show. For anybody tuning in very quickly, you might notice that Spider-Man looks a little bit different today. This is what he looks like unmasked. As we refer to Sean as Spider-Man, he's a tall, lanky kid, and he reminds us a lot of Spider-Man. But he's missing in action today. So when he told me he was unable to make our mentoring sessions today, I just put out a call to the universe and said, anyone want to jump on and have a free mentoring session or just have a chat and discuss anything that they got on their mind? And Keith, you jumped on board first. And so, mate, here you are. Welcome to Mentor Moments. And thank you for stepping in for Sean. Mate, you don't have to spin any webs or do anything like that on this one. You just have to have a fun discussion with us, and hopefully people who are tuning in might have some questions that you and I can both answer, or they might offer some thoughts to us that we can explore and discuss. Other than that, you and I are just going to have a great conversation. It might be just the two of us.
Yeah, maybe it's the middle of the day, but someplace in the world it's the middle of the night. So someone is undoubtedly wasting time on the internet when they should be working somewhere in the world. So
yeah. Well, they might be seeking some really great information to learn and evolve their thinking and everything, mate. So that they may have tuned into this. So who knows?
All right. Okay. Yeah, that's on the subject of spinning webs, spinning things in a positive way. Yeah, I like how you think. I tend to be that way myself. So, yes.
There you go. So, hey, Bass, welcome to the show, mate. Thanks for tuning in. Great to have you here. Bass is also a great leadership guy out there doing amazing stuff in the leadership space as well. So great to have him tuning in here too. So Bass, if you have any insights to our dialogue as it begins, please feel free to throw it in. Your perspectives will be very much welcome. So Keith, talk to me, man. Like, why did you jump on? What have you got a question? You wanna discuss something? I mean, you're doing some amazing work in, if I'm got this correct, making housing work for people again.
So the project that I'm working on, which is kind of, at this point, it's really by way of an obsession. I don't make any money from this project, but I decided a few years ago that everybody needs to do something about climate change. My place to do that would be housing. And because housing, particularly here in Western Australia, is being done really badly. I work as a handyman. That's how I make my living. And so I'm in different people's houses all day. And yeah, I can't describe the standard of housing that we do here without using 4-letter words. So I'm going to keep it clean for LinkedIn and just say, we're not doing it as well as we could be. And
crap is a 4-letter word though, right?
Yeah, shit. All of those words that bodily function words describe this stuff that I'm seeing. But the biggest thing is that we're building houses that it's almost as if they were designed to be hotter in the summer and cooler and colder in the winter. So people come from Europe and they're like, why are these houses so cold? They just can't believe it.
I'm a Canadian. I'd say this to people all the time. We live in the coldest house in Australia here. I cannot understand, like, but you're Canadian, you should like the cold. I'm like, literally, in the winter, I'm dying in here. And even in the summer, it's okay. But
yeah.
But like, it's freezing in here. It's like a totally different kind of cold. Don't get it.
And we've known since the 1970s, really going back 5,000 years. But if you want to talk about a kind of quantified, engineered product, we've known how to build houses since the 1970s that were warm in the winter, cool in the summer, most of the time, most days of the year. So if you said 360 days of the year, they didn't need any form of air conditioning. One of the interviews that's on the website, they put in the coils for the subfloor heating because they were pouring the slab floor, but they've never put on the heat pump because there was no reason to spend $4,000 to connect a heat pump because the house is the same. Yeah, Russia. Yeah, Western Australia. Yes, because And there's no reason for it, but I look at from the standpoint of the people who are providing these services, the architects, the designers, the housing, the builders that are actually working in this niche, the passive solar designed houses. And quite frankly, we're doing a really shithouse job of marketing the product. So most people that I talk to, 90% of the people that I talk to have no idea that they have an option to build a house any way other than the way they're building them right now. What is the, the standard?
The double brick and tile.
Double brick and tile, which, is not a bad building method. It's just not, it doesn't, mostly the houses are simply not, they're the parts, the things that we build our houses from aren't bad. Brick and tile is a good way to build a house. It's as one of the options. The problem is people don't know that there's a whole bunch of new technologies that have come online recently that are reasonably priced, and they don't realize that they could just have their houses designed in a way that it would be, as I keep saying, warm in the winter and cool in the summer. So,
So is it because there's a perception, Keith, that it's it's like trying to eat healthy. It's more expensive than eating crap. But is it like designing a home like that? Is it more expensive and or perceivably more expensive? Now, if it saves you on all your electricity and your gas bills and doing all that sort of stuff, well, in the long run, it's going to be more beneficial. But like the actual construction cost, does it make it more expensive to build a house when you bring in all those elements?
The cost of I'd like to talk to you more about that, Bess. The cost of building a house is in the finishes. So you can build a house with, the way they're building them now, brick and tile, but the shell of the house is going to cost basically the same whether it's a passive solar house or whether it's a standard house. The difference in the cost is the fact that a passive solar house has to be designed for the location that it is, because it has to be designed around the orientation. So the volume builders might have 20 different designs. You can get the Cape Cod, you can get the Pontiac. I don't know what these names are. And they just keep stamping out all the same houses, and they've worked out a price. So they know that it has 3,276 nails in it, and it has, 49 sheets of gyprock and 2,725 bricks, whatever. They've worked it out down to the dollar because they've spread the cost of the engineering and the design across 1,000 homes so they can build it cheaper. If you're building a custom home, so the difference is really between the custom home price, a builder who is building one, every house is slightly different, to a builder that's building the same house over and over again. That's really the big difference. And then, one of the other interviews, woman Val from Bass and Dean, she put in these German windows that are designed where the screens are built into them, and the windows tilt in so you can clean them easily, because she's an older woman and she wanted them really easy, and they're double glazed, and they might even have been triple glazed. So she spent a lot of money on windows because she doesn't want to have any hassles with windows for the rest of her life. So you can spend a lot of money or not a lot of money. I think the big difference is how we think about housing. We've been kind of conned around housing, in that we've been convinced since the 1960s to think of our housing as an investment rather than as the home that your family is going to live in, 4 generations. We used to build houses that would be a home for generations.
Right.
Now we're thinking of housing as an investment, and it's changed completely the way we think about housing. It's down to that dollar value. How much does it cost? I don't want to overcapitalize. All of those kind of
Yeah, but if you're going to flip your
weird
house every
things.
7 years, the average length of a mortgage or whatever a house is approximately 7 years. Why would I want to spend all that money, Keith, if I'm only going to get rid of it in 7 years?
Mm,
Not thinking,
where
of course, that I'm going to buy another one. And if someone else said has the same thing, well, then I'm still going to buy another house that still hasn't done it. Then eventually get to the stage where I'm going to buy my final home, if you like. And then I might think about it. But then I can't be bothered now.
Yeah, exactly. And where if we thought better about how we're doing our housing, we would design our houses so that they work for me. So I'm a young couple, right? Can you imagine me as a young couple? I'm both
Yeah.
parts of the young couple.
Yeah.
And we're buying a house and we're like having friends over on the weekend and it's a big open house. And then a couple of kids come along. And so we bung up a couple of bedrooms, we change it. Then they become teenagers. We want a space within that house where the teenagers can go, where they believe that they're invisible to the adults because that's how teenagers need to live.
Yep.
And then maybe the teenagers move out and some part of the house starts to become an Airbnb. And yeah, and then maybe the kids move back into the house. The Italians, when they came out to Western Australia, they did this really well. They built a shop and they put an apartment up above it. And then those kids that lived in that house, they moved. Eventually, they, got married. They're running the shop, and grandma and grandpa are living up above the shop, babysitting the kids. It's that multi-generational housing. We're just, we're thinking about, and
Yeah.
who benefits from our changing our houses every 7 years?
Well, eventually the kids maybe in the long run, if it's increasing your wealth portfolio, and then when you pass away, their inheritance is bigger.
Mm,
But I guess the thing that comes to my mind when you're talking about that is, um, if you're looking at, obviously it's a human behavior. I'm always look at human
mm,
behavior, and you're right. We've been conditioned to believe that this is the way houses should be built, and we've accepted it for what it is. Um, but look at solar. How long has solar been like? This is my second time living in Australia. I remember living here in the early 80s and solar panels were just coming out and all that sort of stuff and the solar energy thing. And here we are some almost 35 years later, and it's just becoming a popular thing to do now because actually, guess what? We can grab all that energy from the sun, pump it through, cover a lot of our expenses, sometimes even push some back into the grid and get, make money off of our house.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, and I love, and if you look at all the work that Elon Musk is doing, he's trying to find ways to actually make your car, with autonomous vehicles, actually a money generator. When we get to that stage, and your purpose from memory, once I said there was make housing work for people again. So imagine if your house works for you, you don't have to work to have your house, but your house works for you. And when we get to that stage, I think it'll be pretty fascinating. So how do we help people understand that if you build a house where your house works for you, it generates the heat, does all the comforts with it, but also what it does is it's going to push revenue or potentially money back into your pockets, because if you build your house the way where it can contribute to, the environment and society, maybe we can find a way to make money from our houses.
well, that's good space design, and that's really
Yeah.
important. The other uh and that's so there are two sides to what I see as the benefits to passive solar is
Mm.
that the house is cheaper to operate
Yep.
because you're not spending money to keep it comfortable. It's doing it through the sunshine, the prevailing breeze coming in the summer and pulling the heat out.
Yep.
But in the other part of it is that by flushing that air out regularly, you're keeping the house drier and healthier. You're not,
Yep.
I've been it's a tricky thing to talk about, and I've been trying to figure out a way. And one thing that I've observed is that there are a lot of houses that have teenage boys in them.
Yep.
And teenage boys do not smell nice. And what we're doing in our houses right now is we're closing them up. We're refrigerating the air. And for a good portion of the population, we are refrigerating teenage boy smell. And that does not seem like a good idea. That seems
No.
like poor planning. And what we can be doing instead is cooling our houses while carrying teenage boy stank out of our houses. And if you have daughters, they're eventually going to have teenage boys visiting them. And you want to be getting the axe out of the house. You know,
Yeah,
they're going to rise to your door.
absolutely. Yeah, the whole body spray. The actually
Yeah.
in Canada, in our house, well, especially in the winter, when we would use the dryer more often than not, we used to have actually, at the back of the dryer, instead of going there, we'd actually have it pumped back into the house, so that actually the warm with our furnace and everything we had in the basement. But we'd actually then have to not because whenever we used the dryer, the warm air coming out of the back of the dryer, we would pump back into the house, and the whole house would smell like a Febreze or a Downy sheet or whatever.
Nice. Yeah.
But it
Much
also
like
brought the heat back into, maintained the heat back into the house and kept the warm air, and then didn't put as much demand on the furnace during those days.
Yeah, yeah. And the only problem with that can be the amount of dampness. If you've got a furnace that's heating your house, then
Yeah,
it's, when we've got a wood fire in our house, and we actually have a problem with the air drying out a lot.
right.
And, the houses I saw when I was traveling in Canada, they were so well sealed with triple glazing on all the windows that they
Yeah,
actually had to have a vent to bring fresh air into the back of the fire, because otherwise their wood fires could burn up all the oxygen in the house,
yeah.
which
That's
sometimes
also
is
that's not a good
troublesome.
thing either. Yeah.
No, no, no. So,
But it's also
but
amazing what they can do with glass today. One of my clients is Glasgow, WA, and they're inspiring design for a brighter future through glass. And when Todd talks to me about all the glass and what it can do today, the double glazing, triple glazing, it can keep the cold in, can keep the cold out. It can allow the heat to come through. It can stop the heat from coming through. You can, obviously almost I'll use it as a screen, like as a projection screen, and you can have stuff in it. Like it's just amazing that once again here in Australia, we always think, I always joked with the guys that glass is like the fifth horse in a four-horse race when it comes to construction. It's the last thing people ever thought about in building their homes. But with the
yeah,
amazing properties of glass, you'd be surprised at what you can do today, and also then to capture the aspect and bring that sunlight in, and that to warm your house up in the winter. And if you're depending on how you design your home and where you position it, and if people just put a little bit more thought into these sort of things when they're looking at their block of land, and rather than saying, well, this is the way it goes. So there's the fence. These guys have all their bedrooms here. We'll put all our bedrooms there. So our entertainment area is on this side. So and then these guys have their entertainment area on this side, because we just do this flip flop cookie cutter design. Yeah, I can change a few things, but
yeah. Or what I'm seeing regularly is houses where no thought whatsoever has gone into how the blocks. I have some friends who have a house, and it's along the edge of a park, and an east-west facing block with a northerly aspect of a park. So one of the big issues with this kind of housing is somebody coming along and building a 3-story shitbox next to you. That's an engineering term.
absolutely.
And blocking out all your sunlight. So they've got a park all the way down their northern side. And so what did the builder do? They put a garage all the way down that side. So they are perfectly insulated with 5 meters of air gap from any solar gains in the winter. Yeah. So it's like, oh, come on, guys, couldn't you just think a little bit? So, and that's where, my interest, or the interest of the project, is driving consumer demand. We want consumers to look at a house and go, if we buy this house, we will spend the rest of our lives with really high energy bills, or shouting at the kids to get them to close the door, all those things. Yeah, there's another one. You're flushing the heat out of the house rather than trying to air condition it. So for half the year, you don't have to yell at your kids to close the door. So, because you're actually opening the doors to keep to get the heat out of the house when it cools down. It's just, yeah.
So from your perspective, what do you think needs to happen to, I mean, because there's a whole bunch of stakeholders in this who need to we need the architects or designers to be thinking more, not just about designing the house, but how that house sits on the block of land, for example. People who have existing houses, how can they, when they're looking to do renovations, how can they maximize as much as they can or optimize what's already there by the way they either do the renovation and stuff like that. But what do you think needs to happen then, Keith? What do you, I appreciate the great work you guys are doing. You're out there, you're telling the story, but this could take time, right?
Well, I tend to look at well, I'm a storyteller, so I look at this in terms of, so what needs to happen is consumer-led demand, because the volume
Correct.
builders have no interest in changing. They're good at what they do. They do it well. They offer housing at a price that people can afford. But people aren't looking at that long term of saying, yeah, I want a house that's going to work for me for the rest of my life and possibly for my kids' life, and it's going to save us $1,500 to $2,000 a year in energy costs and be healthier and all those things. So what I'm really looking at doing, what we need to do is change what the consumers think about house. So it's creating a cultural change that is
Correct.
what needs to happen. Yeah, other people have said to me, "Oh, you need to change the building code," and it's like, yeah, I'm not that patient. I know people that have spent 20 years trying to fix the building code, and it's like, no. I said to a woman that I met at the TEDx conference, she's been in, planning within the local government for 20 years. I said, thank you for what you do, because after a week, I would run amok with a chainsaw with this.
Yeah.
I
appreciate the consumer demand needs to change. So the consumer, we need to get a consumer demand driven. But how do we get people to then, see the benefit? Because one of the things I always ask real estate people, and I should, one of my buddies is Neil Gibb. They have a J&G Property Group, and another one. I don't know if you know Neil at all, but they're yeah. So his purpose is to build and invest in the future of living. Right, and so they do shared. They build properties where it's actually shared. People can live in an amazing place. You can live in one of the really nicest places around and stuff like that. But you're living, like in a more communal sort of setup, like with 4 or 5 other people. Common rooms, but you have your own space and everything like that, which is really cool. So, because I've always been asking, what's the future of real estate? And I kind of see the future of real estate. Can you imagine 10 or 20 years from now? The next generation's coming in. Do you think they want to be burdened down with a big mortgage and all this, and have that our generations and our parents' generations had? I don't think so. I subject to when we're allowed to travel again, but there's. I kind of see more like the way I describe it's just like timeshare. There'd be this timeshare concept of living where people go, 5 or 6 of us will buy into a 4 or 5 properties, say, around the world, and I'm going to live here for this period of time. And my wife and I joke about having 3 different properties around the globe and triangulating the globe and calling it Claire B&B, right? So, but because that's the way I want to live. I want to have a place here that we can live for 3 months and then spend a month traveling to the next place and live there for 3 months and spend a month traveling to the next place and live there for 3 months and then spend a month traveling to this place. And, and you think about younger generations, are they, as they come through, are they going to want to have a, $500,000 mortgage? And, they're already, trying to do work that they love and create work-life integration and all this sort of stuff. So the future of living and accommodation, and then, obviously there's a lot more care and concern for the environment. And obviously you were at the TEDx, which was the climate change one, I think it was, wasn't it? Just recently here in Perth. Yep. So, we need to be, obviously partnering with organizations, or at least, getting all together and doing whatever we can to move this. But the question to me always comes, what's the future of living? What's human behavior? What's, because we need to find a way to It's far easier to find something that fits with the flow of human behavior than trying to get people to change behavior.
Yes. And one of the biggest issues that is facing our community right now is social isolation. But the
Yep.
whole, that's when people ask me, I think the whole idea of the single family house is a failed model. It only worked well for the banks and the property developers. The idea we will own our own house. And that's making less and less sense as those houses are shrinking. What I really feel is the future is co-housing, work like what Neil's doing, where he's creating the share house. I've got friends who are in share houses, but most of them aren't really designed to be a share house. They were just a single family house that is then rented out to 3 or 4 people. So no real thought has gone into the
No.
design. But then there's the co-housing idea where a group of people, so there's a couple of people, so there's, what are they called? Co-housing. Yeah, so there are organizations that support people to go into shared housing communities, and that's a perfect place for just what you're describing, because if the common areas are shared. I've been working with a group of people called the Sustainable Practitioners Network, and what they're looking to do is help people subdivide their land in such a way, rather than, the standard subdivided land method is you knock off the back of the house, you put a fence around it, you bring a driveway, you brick pave everything within an inch of its life. And what the Sustainable Practitioners Network people are doing is saying, keep the cars out at the front of the land, don't put a driveway in, and then all that backyard space, turn it into shared common area. So, and then, put out the house at the back. So it's a different way of thinking, where we've been talked into this idea of the castle, of my place. But, so Chris Ferreira is one of the people from the Sustainable Practitioners Network, and he's got a block in Hamilton Hill. I get these suburbs mixed up. And he's subdividing and building 2 strata-tiled units at the back of his block, but there's no driveway into it. You'll walk through the yard, and you can use that whole backyard. There's this gorgeous jacaranda tree in the middle of the yard. And what the standard thing to do, the very first thing they would do would be to cut down that tree and chip it. And instead that becomes a feature that everybody gets to enjoy. So, and keeping the property cooler and all those kind of things. So this is what my interest is there is a whole bunch of people. Sorry, I just remembered the other group of people that are doing this really well is Cooperation Housing. I said their name wrong.
Yep.
So yeah, they're working with larger groups of people. And so again, there's a whole bunch of people who know how to do this well, but they're almost secret organizations. My hippie friends know about them, but ordinary people, because they go to the the parties and
are us, know who they are.
Yeah. And that's what we've done so poorly. And I feel really bad about it, because people they don't know that they have an option to do things differently than what they've been told is their only option. So it's, so there's another woman who's she's got the Henry Project. And what she's doing is helping people buy a single family house, because lots of places are still, you can't subdivide or anything. Like Fremantle, it's R20. So you can have one house on one block. And but what you can do is you can buy a, say, $1.5 million house in, $1.2 million house on the beach in Fremantle. Maybe a couple of streets back. You're probably not going to get on the beach for that price. But you can then turn it into 2 or 3 different apartments. And and then have a shared common area, because there's all these gigantic houses that have been built down
Yeah.
along that coastline that have 2 people living in them.
Yeah.
They've got enough room for 15, but you can have, with the R20 building code, you can have up to 6 people who are not related living in the same house together. And so it's like, but why aren't we doing this? So,
well, once again, gets to that demand. So a couple of things then, because we're going to have to wrap up, but and things that I've already looked at that you're doing really well. So you've already got your early adopters, and you've got all those testimonials and stuff on the site there, and you've got them telling their stories, which is great. So that I would, keep doing that. Like that's we got to keep telling more stories, tell more stories, tell more stories. And you've touched on a couple of things here that I just made notes with, and it's like people are tribal. How do we? It's almost like it's a community thing. Like we need to this is like communities, and we as much as we like our alone time, we're still tribal creatures. We're tribal at work. We hang out in teams at work. We love sporting teams. But for some reason, when we live, we want to go live in our little, So that's gonna be one of the big. How do we reframe that and rebuild that concept of being this tribal way of hanging out with other people is really cool. I think there's just an opportunity going forward also to look at these houses, like the house we're in. At least blessedly, it has solar. We have a solar heated pool, which is awesome. That is set to send back to the grid. Buddy of mine up in Geraldton, his shed home, his show. Actually, he's almost making money off of his solar stuff he's got set up on his shed home. And is so the ability to almost either cost neutral or possibly in the future drive revenue back into the household. So either driving revenue or reducing cost or both thereof, and then whilst increasing comfort, how do we get all the accoutrements of the things that we have today, do it at less cost, and give you more, and just like what I call it's an epic question. How do we give the consumer more, not charge them anymore or possibly less, and make more?
Yeah, and
We need to be asking that level of epic questions, because that epic questions will create epic thinking, which will then drive epic results. But also, and I'm sure I'll be preaching to the choir. This is a long game.
Yes, yeah. It's a long game.
If you're not in this for the long game, you're going to be crazy like this. I mean, so like I said, solar has been going on for 35 years, and now it's just a normal thing to have on your house.
Yeah. Where 30 years ago, it's like, what are those big black things you got on your roof? They're kind of ugly. It was a weird thing to do. And that's, but I liked, in thinking about marketing and change, where is it? Hang on a second. I have a prop.
Oh, cool.
So probably most of your viewers aren't old enough to remember the black Bakelite Telstra phone.
Yes.
Yeah, and these were great because when somebody really pissed you off, you could really slam them down, and it was so satisfying. And it was like, I told them. And then, what was it, 2005, Steve Jobs came out with the iPhone.
Yeah.
And you couldn't give those things away now. I went into somebody's garage and I said, oh, I've been looking for one of those because I needed a prop. And he said, oh, you can just have that. For 50 years, they were the standard. And then it's like, yeah, please get this junk out of my shed.
Yep.
And I think we can do that. We just have to get better at marketing.
Yeah, and you used that Steve Jobs example there, Keith. What you're talking about, like 2005. If you look at this old crappy phone, and it was only 15 years ago.
Yeah. So we could.
So I think there's an acceleration of adoption. It's still not going to be overnight. Don't get me wrong, but there's an acceleration of adoption. But when you're telling more stories and better stories, and and those stories have to obviously speak to, and it's kind of like if you think about lyrics. Right. So imagine when the Backstreet Boys are singing about teenage heartbreak and all this sort of stuff back in the 90s, and all the teenagers are going, they must have read my mind, and this is why, and all of a sudden, it was a great comment made in the book called Superfans, which is a highly cool book. And that's where the concept was, like I said, when you're writing lyrics that speak to the hearts and minds of the audience that you want. And it's like, it's like you're singing their song,
Yes.
then and so we need to start finding what is the song that we need to be singing for the people that are going to go, oh. And I think this is going to be like a shift in marketing, is we need to really start to understand what is the song that we should be singing that's in the hearts and minds that I should be singing, to people who I choose to serve. I need to be singing their song, not my song to them.
Yes, exactly. And that's where I feel like in a lot of this area of housing, we've really failed the people, because
Yeah.
we've been talking about sustainability and
Yeah.
that it's good for the planet. And people just
So
aren't making buying decisions based on that.
that's right. So if you take all those stories, take a look at all the stories of all those amazing videos. I'd have to go back and have a look myself, but are we telling the story of the house? Are we telling the story of the person in the house?
Yeah, I hope if I'm doing my job right, then I have to go back and look at them all again. What I really want to be doing is telling the story of the people living in that house and what life
Right.
is like. So if I'm succeeding in that, then I'm doing my work. I do have
Right.
a question for you.
Yep. Sure.
In so there's a lot of what we've talked about is, I'm just looking at your board behind you, and it's saying culture and strategy. And what I'm
Yep.
interested in is cultural change. How do
Yes.
we change people in thinking about housing? But the other thing that I really need to do is find a way to be bringing some money into this project, either through sponsorship, advertising, grants,
Yep.
something. Because right now I'm doing this as an obsession, as people often do.
Yep. Start
And
with that. Yeah.
yeah, and I've got a bunch of young people who are working for me because they're also committed to making change in the environment. And so, but
They're working with you.
yeah, yeah. Well, I've got
Yeah. 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 No, I saw on your page there. I could see those amazing people there. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I don't even
But I
have
just
them
said they're
all.
not working for you. They're not working for you. They're working with you because you're all working
Yeah,
for the
yeah.
cause.
Thank you for that correction. Yes, they
Yeah.
are working with me. Often they're, taking a lot of
Yeah.
responsibility for making things happen, but we're still, you know, we need to be able to start paying people to be able to start doing this all the time. So,
Yeah.
my biggest question now is, people have been asking me for years, how are you going to monetize that? And I was like, oh, why would I worry about that? It's like asking a guy who's going fishing, you know, how are you going to monetize your fishing? It's an obsession. I just do it. Um,
Yeah. But
but
how
it's getting,
the fishing one is easy. You start a fishing video blogcast, show yourself fishing, and you get lots of people who are really excited about it, following it, and then you speak to the local tackle shop and say, "Hey, if you give me some fishing equipment and gear, I'll wear it. I'll put your name on my video. I've got 1,000 people who view my video in your area every week," and then they start to give you that, and then you get this, and then it builds, right? So if you
yeah,
take that same concept, if you're out there and you're talking about certain products and saying, "Hey, we're promoting this product here, and these people in this house have used it," go talk to them, go ask them if they want to participate. You know,
yeah,
um,
yeah,
and just if they want to throw a few dollars your way or whatever they want to do, or if any sales that come directly through that you get some sort of let's say, call it a commission or whatever. But you're going to have to find ways to do that, because money or profitability or revenue to a business is like oxygen to us as human beings, right?
mm,
You need it to survive, but you weren't born just to breathe,
yeah, yeah,
right? So you have a purpose for why you're doing it. You just need some more fuel, and the more fuel you can put into that, more
mm,
energy you can get. So money is just an energy. So you got to create a solar panel that's going to pull that energy and transform it and do it to something. The exact same process that we're talking about here. And how do we capture that energy that's floating around and get it to channel through your business solar panels so that you can use it to better the world? I mean, it's the
yeah,
same concept, right? Money is just energy. And how are
yes,
you going to
yeah,
make it flow to what you're doing? But then to do that is like, well, what's in it for me? What's in it for the people to participate? Not only, obviously, the great reason is to make housing work for people again, and the whole benefits of the passive solar home and all this sort of stuff. But the promotion, and once again, if we're telling those stories, there'd be advertising revenue. I would imagine opportunities there. You could get certainly sponsorships of the people who are really behind this. Is there any government incentives? I have no clue. I would just grab a whiteboard, right, and I would go revenue, and what are all the possible ways that we could derive revenue, right? And then just start brainstorming, and then just pick one, and then see how that goes. Then pick another one, and see how that goes. And pick another one, and you'll find your rhythm, your cadence, because you already have the obsession. That's already there. You have people who are volunteers who are part of the cause of the calling. Now we just need to find a way to add some fuel to this beast and get it moving.
That's the challenge. And
that's the $1 million question, as it were, right? Literally and figuratively. So
we don't even need that much, just.
Well, how much do you need? So get your mind clear on how much you need, and then let's say, okay, imaginary number. Let's say we need $10,000 for the next 3 months. We need 10 grand. So how can I find 10,000 people to give me $1?
Yeah.
Like give the cause $1.
Yep.
What are you going to do with that 10 grand? It's like, you're going on Shark Tank, and I'm going to be honest, we got to get going here. But if you're going to go on Shark Tank, I want you to invest in this business, and for this amount, I'll give you this return, and here's what we need the money for.
Yeah.
If you could get 10,000, what would you do with it? You don't have to answer that right now, but if you could have whatever the money is in your head that you think you want or need, what for? What would you do with it? What's the impact of doing that? As part of the storytelling, of course, and then saying, okay, now do I need to get 10,000 ones or 100 hundreds, or do I need to get 10 1,000s or 1,000 tens? Do I need to?
Yeah, exactly.
And break it down into something digestible, then say, okay, now who might be interested in that? Who might find value in this? Who could we provide value to? Who could we offer something to that they're not getting right now? That they might say, hey, yeah, we'll take $100 for that.
Yep. Yeah.
If you could get 100 sponsors to pay you $100, you got 10 grand.
Yep. Yeah. I've tried to
how do we get that $10,000? And we're trying to take the full 10,000. I'm saying, well, how can you get $1 from? Like I've got one of my people always talk to me about money, and I said, like, one of my big goal for me in life is to create and inspire 90 million purpose-driven leaders. Now that's way bigger than me, and I need people to support and help that, and I probably will never achieve it in my lifetime. But if I just made $1 off of each leader, I'd do okay.
Yeah, you could muddle through on 90 million.
So when you put it in a context or perspective, sometimes it shifts your thinking. Okay, well, great. So how would I make $1 off of somebody that I could help?
Yeah.
And you got to honor the one, right? Because sometimes all you need is one in a row. So if I can get $1 from one person, until you get that first dollar, the first 10, the first 100, whatever it is, honor that one. But then you can't have 200 until you've had 100.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, I like that thinking.
So that's what I would challenge you with, mate. But we do have to get going. We're already like up to 45 minutes, and I've got to go see Neil. Actually, he's probably waiting for me. He's my next appointment. Yeah, no, especially when I'm going to see him about some productivity and time management, which I don't believe in, but how to manage your time better.
I believe in time management. I learned a lot about that when I went back to uni at 50. Yeah, you have to believe in time management then.
No, I believe in self-management. Time, you can't stop time from ticking, buddy, but it's just how you choose to use it.
Exactly. That's a good way to put it. Dave, this has been fun. And
mate, thank you so much for joining in, Keith, and for putting your hand up and being willing to come on here and sharing your story. So if anybody watching this, please, Keith is looking for sponsorship, donations to make housing work for people again, and looking at this passive housing and how to make everything better for the world that we're all living in, because we're all responsible for this. So someone last comment here. Dave, love watching and learning from you, but the time difference in Canada is killing me. How can I see before I need to be in bed, lol? Oh, Mike is a good buddy of mine back in Canada at Capital Graphics, if I recall correctly, Mike, who's watching. Mate, so anybody out there, if they want to get hold of you, Keith, where can they get hold of you?
Well, the best place is to go to the website, The Comfortable Home Project, or they can email me, which is really easy because my name's up on the screen, keith.hutchings@gmail.com. Or I can be found on LinkedIn most moments of the day. So, I spend too much time on LinkedIn, but I'm having entirely too much fun. Cool.
Mate, well, it's
Yeah, thank you
you,
very
you
much.
wouldn't be here if you weren't, because then you wouldn't have seen what I put up, and we wouldn't be having this great conversation.
Yes, great.
Okay,
And
mate.
yes, to Mike and Bass for joining us. And
Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
Mike, all the way from Canada too, which is really cool. So,
uh, at best it's 2 o'clock in the morning there. Yeah,
yeah, it is. So, Mike, thank you so much for staying up this late to see me, mate. It's so good to hear from you again. Keith, thanks again for tuning in, mate, and we'll keep me posted on your progress, mate. I'd love to hear how things are going for you.
that'll be great. Okay. Thanks
Cheers,
for
buddy.
that. See ya.
Yeah.